Welcome to the inner sanctum of the Audiobook Empire. You are currently standing at the threshold of the most vital information stream in the human experience. In the science of human relationships, words are nothing more than neural static. They are the low-resolution tools that people use to conceal their true intentions, to build social masks, and to project an identity that does not exist in biological reality. The bungler spends their entire life listening to words, reacting to sentences, and wondering why they are constantly blindsided by the actions of those around them. They are operating on a broken frequency. The sovereign master, however, recognizes that the body cannot lie. Your biological hardware was coded millions of years before your ancestors developed the ability to speak. Long before we had nouns and verbs, we had the tilt of a head, the dilation of a pupil, and the rigid tension of a shoulder. These are the source signals of the grid. To command the 1% margin, you must learn to bypass the verbal interface and audit the raw physical data. You are about to master the power of body language, not as a hobby, but as a clinical instrument of social dominance and internal sovereignty. Every human node in your network is a broadcasting station. They are constantly leaking data about their level of comfort, their hidden aggressions, their insecurities, and their true feelings toward you. Most people are blind nodes. They are so consumed by their own internal static, their ego, their anxiety, their need to be liked, that they fail to see the flashing warning lights right in front of them. The sovereign master practices total situational calibration. You enter every interaction as a clinical observer, a scientist in a laboratory of human specimens. You do not look at people. You audit their baselines. To understand when someone is lying or when they are concealing a black swan, you must first understand how they move when they are at peace. This is the foundation of the 1% margin. You observe the rhythm of their breathing, the habitual placement of their hands, and the natural posture of their spine. Once you have the baseline, any deviation becomes a high-resolution signal. A sudden shift in weight, a momentary micro-expression of contempt, or the shielding of the neck, these are the coordinates that reveal the truth behind the mask. Consider the law of limbic dominance. Your brain is divided into layers, and the most ancient parts, the limbic system, are responsible for your survival. When a node feels threatened, uncomfortable, or defensive, the limbic system takes over. It triggers the freeze, flight, or fight response. These reactions are involuntary. A person can rehearse a speech for 1,000 hours, but they cannot stop their pupils from constricting when they feel a flash of dislike. They cannot stop the ventral shielding, the instinctive move to cover the vital organs when they feel exposed. As a sovereign, you are looking for these limbic leaks. When you see a target cross their arms or place an object between you and them, you are not seeing a random movement, you are seeing a neural blockade. They are signaling that the frequency of the interaction has become hostile or uncomfortable. Instead of reacting with static, you use tactical empathy to lower their defenses, watching their body language for the exact second the blockade drops. This is how you navigate the grid with surgical precision. Furthermore, we must analyze the architecture of authority. In the Audiobook Empire, we do not ask for respect. We broadcast a frequency that commands it. Space is the ultimate currency of dominance. The bungler tries to make themselves small. They hunch their shoulders, they fidget with their hands, and they avoid eye contact to signal that they are not a threat. They are broadcasting a submissive frequency. The sovereign master occupies space with clinical confidence. You understand that stillness is the ultimate sign of power. A node that is constantly moving is a node that is anxious and seeking validation. A node that can remain perfectly still, with an open posture and steady eye contact, signals that they are the lead node of the network. They are not threatened by the environment because they own the environment. This is the 1% margin of physical presence. By controlling your own biological signals, you force the other nodes in the room to calibrate to your tempo. You become the anchor point of the interaction. Let us audit the eye contact grid. The eyes are the highest bandwidth sensors in the human body. Most people use eye contact as a tool of social submission or aggression, but the sovereign uses it as a data scanner. You do not stare like a predator, nor do you look away like a servant. You maintain the sovereign gaze, a calm, focused, and clinical observation that signals you are processing everything. You look for the flash of recognition, the blink rate of a person under pressure, and the direction of their gaze when they are accessing memory versus when they are constructing a lie. When a person's blink rate increases, their neural processing load is high. They are struggling to maintain the mask. This is where you find the black swans. This is where the truth is hidden in the silence. By holding your gaze a second longer than the social norm, you test the target's sovereign shielding. If they look down, they have yielded the coordinate. If they look away, they are seeking an escape. If they hold the gaze, you have found a node of high resolution. In your global network, you must also master the science of proxemics, the study of personal space. Every human node has a series of orbital shells around them. There is the public space, the social space, the personal space, and the intimate space. The bungler violates these spaces accidentally, creating grid friction and making people instinctively defensive. The sovereign uses space as a tactical lever. You know exactly when to move into a person's personal shell to create a neural spike of pressure and when to lean back to give them the illusion of control. By manipulating the distance between you and the target, you are directly affecting their brain chemistry. You are triggering the release of cortisol or oxytocin without saying a single word. This is the ultimate stealth protocol. You are hacking the target's biological OS through the simple geometry of the room. We must also audit the hands of truth. The human brain gives more neural real estate to the hands than to almost any other part of the body. In our evolutionary past, if we couldn't see a node's hands, we assumed they were holding a weapon. That instinct remains. When you hide your hands, in your pockets, under a table, or behind your back, you are broadcasting a red frequency of untrustworthiness. The sovereign always keeps their hands visible. You use steepling, touching the fingertips together, to signal high confidence and intellectual dominance. You avoid self-soothing behaviors such as touching your neck or adjusting your watch, because these are neural signal flares that announce your anxiety to the world. A sovereign's hands are calm, purposeful, and open. They signal that you have nothing to hide and everything to gain. As we continue our clinical audit of the human broadcast system, we move from the extremities to the most deceptive yet revealing coordinate, the face. The bungler spends their entire life looking at the mouth, believing that a smile is a universal signal of warmth. But the sovereign master recognizes the smile of the serpent, a strategic mask designed to manipulate the grid. We look for the Duchenne marker, the involuntary contraction of the orbicularis oculi muscles around the eyes. A counterfeit smile is a bottom-up gesture. It only involves the zygomatic major muscles of the mouth. It is a social performance. A genuine smile is a top-down biological event. If the eyes do not narrow and the skin does not crinkle, you are dealing with a node that is performing a script. You label this as static, and you look for the underlying intent. This is the 1% margin. You are not deceived by the performance because you are auditing the biology. When you see a counterfeit smile in a negotiation, you know the target is uncomfortable or attempting to hide a black swan. You do not call them out. You simply adjust your frequency and wait for the mask to slip further. Furthermore, we must descend into the science of limbic honesty, which is found in the legs and feet. Because the feet are the furthest points from the brain, they are the least monitored by the ego. The bungler ignores the floor, but the sovereign master knows that the feet are the most honest nodes in the entire network. Audit the direction of a person's feet during an interaction. If their torso is facing you but their feet are pointed toward the exit, their limbic system has already decided to leave. The source signal is broadcasting a desire for flight. They are physically present, but neurally they have already exited the coordinate. If a person is sitting with their legs crossed and their top foot is pointing toward you, they are in a state of high-resolution interest. If the foot points away, they are signaling grid friction. By observing these silent navigators, you can determine the true state of the interaction before a single word of disagreement is spoken. You are reading the internal GPS of the human animal. Let us now analyze ventral shielding, the instinctive protection of the front of the body. In our evolutionary past, our vital organs were exposed and vulnerable. When we feel threatened, we instinctively cover our ventral side. This is why a node will suddenly cross their arms, button their jacket, or hold a laptop in front of their chest during a difficult conversation. They are building a neural wall. The bungler sees this as a casual movement. The sovereign master sees it as a limbic blockade. You recognize that the target feels exposed. To maintain your 1% margin, you do not push harder against the wall. Instead, you offer a psychological gift, perhaps a glass of water or a document to look at, to force them to uncross their arms and break the blockade. You are a neural engineer, manipulating the target's physical state to reopen the communication channel. We must also audit the sovereign gaze versus the aggressive stare. Eye contact is a high-bandwidth sensor, but it must be calibrated. The bungler either avoids eye contact, signaling submission, or stares too intensely, signaling a threat frequency. The sovereign master utilizes the social triangle, focusing the gaze on the eyes and the forehead to maintain an atmosphere of clinical authority. You look for pupillary dilation, which is an involuntary response to interest and arousal, and pupillary constriction, which signals dislike or hidden aggression. You observe the blink rate. A rapid increase in blinking indicates neural overload or the stress of maintaining a lie. By staying calm and holding your gaze for a fraction of a second longer than the social norm, you establish yourself as the lead node. You are not just looking, you are scanning for signal leaks. The protocol of mirroring must also be mastered at a biological level. When two nodes are in sync, they instinctively adopt the same posture. This is neural isopraxism. The sovereign master uses delayed mirroring to build a bridge of trust. You do not mimic them like a puppet. You subtly align your tempo and posture with theirs. Once the neural connection is established, you test the link by leading. You change your posture, perhaps leaning back or unfolding your arms, and you wait to see if the target follows. If they do, you have successfully occupied their frequency. You have moved from observation to command. This is how the audiobook empire is built, through the silent, invisible leverage of biological synchronization. Consider the gravity of truth in gestures. When a node is speaking the truth, their gestures are gravity-defying. Their hands move upward, their eyebrows rise, and their posture expands. They are broadcasting a high-energy frequency. When a node is lying or feels defeated, gravity takes over. Their shoulders slump, their hands hang heavy, and their head tilts downward. This is limbic heaviness. You audit these shifts in physical altitude to determine the authenticity of the broadcast. A sudden drop in altitude after a specific question is a red signal. It indicates that the target's internal state has collapsed. You are the clinical auditor who detects the fracture in the mask. You see the static for what it is, a desperate attempt to maintain a low-resolution illusion. In the global network, space is the ultimate currency. We must master proxemics, the geometry of social distance. Every sovereign must know their intimate, personal, and social zones. The bungler violates these zones and creates neural static, making the target defensive. The sovereign master uses space as a tactical instrument. You know exactly when to lean in to apply neural pressure and when to lean back to create sovereign space. By controlling the distance, you control the target's heart rate and adrenaline levels. You are hacking their biology through the simple geometry of the room. This is the 1% margin of spatial dominance. You are not just standing in a room, you are occupying a coordinate. As we conclude the opening phase of our mission, you must realize that you are now a high-resolution operator. The world of low-resolution words is behind you. You are now tuned in to the source signal of the human species. You see the limbic leaks, you recognize the ventral shielding, and you understand the architecture of authority. You are no longer a reactive node, you are a sovereign architect. The Audiobook Empire is not just a collection of summaries, it is a clinical training ground for those who refuse to be deceived by the masks of the world. Stay on the frequency. The grid is silent, waiting for your next move. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. The mission of total dominance continues. Let us now advance our clinical audit to the mechanics of the freeze response in modern social architecture. While the ancient animal froze to avoid the gaze of a predator, the modern human node freezes to conceal neural friction or internal discomfort. When you introduce a high-pressure variable into the grid, a pointed question, a sudden shift in terms, or a display of clinical authority, observe the target for physical stasis. A node that suddenly stops moving, whose breathing becomes shallow and whose gestures vanish, is a node that has entered a limbic lockdown. They are struggling to process the frequency shift. The sovereign master recognizes this silence not as a lack of data, but as the highest bandwidth signal available. In this stasis of stasis, the mask is at its most fragile. You do not rush to fill the silence, you allow the pressure of the freeze to mount. The first node to break the stasis with a pacifying gesture or a verbal explanation is the node that yields the coordinate. By mastering your own ability to remain in a state of sovereign stillness, you force the network to calibrate to your absolute frequency. We must also audit the armbar protocol. The arms are the primary tools for territorial expansion and protection. When a node crosses their arms tightly across their chest, grasping their biceps, they are performing self-hardening. This is a high-resolution signal of extreme defensiveness or internal distress. They are literally holding themselves together in the face of grid turbulence. However, there is a 1% margin of difference between this and the regal cross, where the arms are crossed loosely with the hands visible. The former is a blockade, the latter is a broadcast of comfortable dominance. You must also look for the arm behind the back lock. When a node holds one arm behind their back, gripping the wrist or the elbow, they are signaling a state of high tension and self-control. They are restraining their own reactions. The sovereign master observes this and knows that the target is withholding a black swan. You have occupied their neural space, and they are struggling to maintain the illusion of composure. You continue the audit, looking for the exact moment the grip tightens, revealing the core of their anxiety. The science of the handshake requires a deeper investigation into the neural handshake. Beyond the initial contact, the hand-over-hand, or the politician's handshake, is a maneuver designed to broadcast false sincerity while asserting physical control. The sovereign master recognizes this as artificial frequency. When someone attempts to cover your hand with their second hand, they're trying to box your signal. You neutralize this by moving into their personal space, shifting the geometry of the interaction and reclaiming your sovereign space. Furthermore, observe the finger-point-to-palm signal. When a node points their finger into their own palm while speaking, they are neural marking their point. It is an unconscious attempt to give weight to a weak argument. You audit this as compensatory static. They are trying to convince themselves as much as they are trying to convince you. You stay on the frequency of raw data, ignoring the performance and focusing on the underlying limbic weakness. Let us deconstruct the protocol of the chin and jaw. The jaw is a primary indicator of neural stress. When a node is under pressure, the masseter muscles tighten, causing the jaw to clench or move laterally. This is a primal signal of suppressed aggression or intense discomfort. Observe the chin jut, a forward movement of the lower jaw. This is a broadcast of defiance and territorial challenge. The sovereign master does not mirror this aggression. You maintain a neutral mask and a deep frequency tonality. By remaining calm in the face of a limbic challenge, you signal that the target's broadcast is failing to affect your internal state. You are the lead node, and your stability eventually forces the target to de-escalate. Additionally, look for the chin stroke or the jaw rub. This is a cognitive processing signal. The target is evaluating the data. You do not interrupt this process. You allow the silence to act as a neural catalyst, forcing the target to reach a conclusion that favors your sovereign OS. We must also audit the science of ventral fronting. We have spoken of shielding, but fronting is the broadcast of absolute trust or absolute dominance. When a node turns their entire body, their heart, their stomach, and their hips directly towards you, they are ventrally fronting. They are giving you their most vulnerable coordinates. This is a high-resolution green frequency. It signals that the interaction is in a state of neural resonance. However, if a node ventrally fronts a third party while speaking to you, their true interest lies with that third party. You are being blocked from the core signal. The sovereign master recognizes this signal diversion and does not waste energy on a fractured interaction. You either recalibrate the grid to reclaim the focus, or you exit the coordinate with clinical efficiency. You do not settle for a low-resolution connection. You are the sovereign architect of the interaction, reading the silent blueprint of the human animal. Finally, we audit the protocol of the feet in motion. In a seated environment, the knee bounce or foot tap is often dismissed as nervous energy. The sovereign knows it as neural overload. The brain has too much stimulus to process, and the energy is leaking out through the extremities. If the tapping starts the moment a specific topic is introduced, you have identified a neural trigger. You have found the static. Conversely, if a node is sitting with their feet tucked under their chair, they are in a limbic retreat. They are making themselves smaller to avoid the grid's scrutiny. You observe these pedal signals and you know the truth of the target's confidence long before they finish their sentence. We must now calibrate our sensors for the protocol of hand-to-face touching and the geography of insecurity. The bungler believes that a hand touching the face is a definitive sign of a lie, but the sovereign master recognizes this as neural friction. When the brain is under the stress of concealing a black swan or calculating a deceptive frequency, the capillaries in the face and neck often experience a subtle tingle, a biological reaction to the surge of cortisol and adrenaline. The hand moves to scratch the nose, rub the eye, or tug the earlobe as a neural reset. These are not random movements, they are signal flares from the limbic system. When you observe a node performing these gestures in response to a specific coordinate in the conversation, you have identified a fracture in the mask. You do not interrupt, you lean into the silence. You watch the hand move, and you wait for the verbal explanation that will inevitably try to cover the biological truth. The sovereign master knows that the more a person talks to explain away a gesture, the deeper they fall into the static. You stay on the frequency of raw observation. Let us now audit the law of territorial conquest in the context of the grid's geometry. In any high-stakes environment, the node with the highest status occupies the most sovereign space. This is achieved through the architecture of stillness. The bungler is perpetually in motion, adjusting their tie, checking their phone, shifting their weight. This high-frequency fidgeting signals to the network that the node is reactive and uncalibrated. The sovereign master, however, utilizes massive stillness. When you occupy a chair, you do not just sit, you anchor yourself. Your movements are slow, deliberate, and expensive. You expand your physical footprint by placing your items, your watch, your pen, your notepad, in a wide orbital shell around you. This is a nonverbal declaration of total command. By expanding your territory, you force the other nodes to contract. You are claiming the 1% margin through the simple physics of the room. You become the center of the grid, and everyone else must calibrate to your stillness. We must also deconstruct the protocol of the steepling hands. This is the ultimate sovereign broadcast. By touching the tips of the fingers together in a steeple shape, you signal absolute confidence and intellectual dominance. It is a high-resolution signal that tells the network you have already solved the problem. The bungler often attempts this, but fails, because their hands shake or they hold the steeple too low, signaling a counterfeit frequency. The sovereign master holds the steeple with clinical precision. You use it when you are delivering the final term of a deal or when you are auditing a subordinate. It creates a neural shield that protects your internal state while projecting an aura of invincibility. Conversely, watch for the clutched hands, where the fingers are interlocked tightly. This is a signal of internal suppression. The target is literally holding themselves back from expressing anger or frustration. When you see the knuckles turn white, you know the pressure in the network is reaching a critical point. You use this data to decide whether to apply more pressure or to provide an escape path. Furthermore, let us analyze the science of the micro-expression of contempt. Contempt is the most dangerous frequency in the global network because it signals a lack of peer status. It manifests as a subtle, asymmetrical lift of one corner of the mouth, a sneer that lasts for a fraction of a second. The bungler misses this signal because they are blinded by their own ego. The sovereign master, however, is always scanning for this signal leak. If you see a flash of contempt in a partner or an ally, you have found a rotten coordinate. You recognize that the neural connection is fractured beyond repair. You do not argue. You simply begin the de-escalation protocol. You withdraw your trust and your resources because you know that a node that feels contempt will eventually sabotage the network. You are the clinical auditor who detects the poison before it enters the system. The architecture of the neck also requires our attention. The vagus nerve runs through the neck, and when a node is under extreme neural stress, they will often perform neck venting. For men, this involves pulling at the shirt collar to let air in. For women, it often involves lifting the hair off the back of the neck. This is a biological attempt to cool the body down and reset the nervous system. The sovereign master observes this thermal reset and recognizes it as a sign of maximum vulnerability. The target's sovereign shielding has failed. They are overheating under the pressure of your clinical observation. You stay cool. You maintain your late-night DJ voice. You let the silence act as a cold wind in the room, further destabilizing their frequency. You are in total control of the atmospheric pressure of the interaction. Finally, we audit the protocol of the pupil. The eyes are the only part of the human anatomy where the brain is directly visible to the external world. While a node can control their words and even their posture, they cannot control their pupillary response. When a person sees something they like, a proposal, a person, an idea, their pupils dilate. It is a high-resolution green light. When they encounter something they dislike or feel threatened by, Their pupils constrict into pinpoints. This is the primal shutdown. The sovereign master monitors these neural shifts with surgical focus. By observing the pupillary frequency, you gain access to the target's subconscious audit. You know their true reaction before they even have the chance to formulate a lie. You are the neural interceptor, catching the signal at the source. This is the 1% margin that separates the master from the bungler. The audiobook empire is built on this absolute clarity. Stay on the frequency. The grid is yours. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. To achieve total mastery of the grid, we must now audit the vocal blueprint, the non-verbal frequency of the human voice. The bungler believes that the words carry the message, but the sovereign master recognizes that the tonality and pacing carry the power. In the science of human relationships, a high-pitched, rapid broadcast signals a reactive node, someone whose limbic system is in a state of agitation or submission. They are seeking validation. The sovereign master utilizes the late-night DJ voice, a low, resonant, and slow-frequency broadcast. This tonality bypasses the target's logical defenses and speaks directly to their ancient biological hardware. By slowing down your speech and lowering your pitch, you signal to the network that you are the anchor point. You are not threatened by the environment. The environment must calibrate to you. This is the 1% margin of vocal dominance. You use strategic silence as a neural weapon. When the bungler stops speaking, the void is a power vacuum. The bungler feels a desperate need to fill it with static. They reveal secrets, they lower their prices, and they expose their insecurities just to break the pressure of your silence. You stay still. You stay quiet. You let the target dismantle their own mask. Let us now deconstruct the protocol of the visual blockade. When a node encounters information or individuals they find repulsive or threatening, they perform eyelid guarding, closing their eyes for a fraction of a second longer than a normal blink. This is a biological attempt to delete the stimulus from their neural grid. The sovereign master monitors this signal drop with surgical focus. If you mention a specific term in a contract and the target's eyes close momentarily, you have identified a friction coordinate. They are literally blocking the reality of the situation. You do not ignore this. You lean into the detail that triggered the blockade. Furthermore, observe the eye rub, a more intense form of the visual block. It indicates that the target is experiencing neural overload. They are struggling to maintain their sovereign shielding. You recognize this vulnerability and you maintain your clinical pressure. You are the observer who sees the truth behind the closed lids. We must also audit the science of pre-departure cues. Before a node physically leaves a coordinate, their biology broadcasts the intent. Observe the weight shift, a subtle movement of the center of gravity toward the exit. Look for the seat edge shift, where the target moves to the edge of their chair, placing their hands on their knees. This is the primal launch position. The bungler misses these signals and continues to talk to a node that has already checked out. The sovereign master recognizes the exit signal instantly. You do not wait for them to leave. You reclaim the lead by ending the interaction on your own terms. By being the one to initiate the conclusion, you maintain your status as the lead node. You control the beginning, the middle, and the end of every interaction in the network. This is how the audiobook empire maintains its absolute sovereignty. Furthermore, let us analyze the architecture of the hands in the context of high-status preening. When a node is in a position of dominance, they will often perform preening gestures, adjusting their clothing, brushing a speck of dust off their sleeve, or smoothing their hair while looking at the target. This is not about hygiene. It is a territorial broadcast. It signals that the node is so comfortable in the environment that they can focus on their own appearance. It is a subtle display of clinical indifference. The sovereign master uses this to signal that the current neural static in the room does not affect their internal state. You are broadcasting that you are the most stable node in the grid. Conversely, watch for the lint-picking gesture during a disagreement. It is a sign of passive aggression or hidden disagreement. The target is ignoring your broadcast by focusing on a trivial task. You recognize this neural diversion and you reset the frequency to demand total engagement. You are the operator who controls the tempo of the grid. Finally, we audit the protocol of the feet in a standing environment. When three nodes are engaged in a conversation, observe the triangle geometry. If the feet of all three nodes are pointed toward each other, the neural connection is closed and focused. If one node's feet are pointed away, they are signal leaking their desire to exit the interaction or their interest in a different coordinate. The sovereign master audits this pedal orientation to determine where the true power lies in the room. You do not follow the noise, you follow the feet. By positioning your own feet to box in a target, you exert physical pressure on their limbic system, forcing them to focus on your broadcast. This is the ultimate stealth maneuver, controlling the direction of the interaction through the geometry of the floor. Finally, we audit the science of the shoulder shrug. We have discussed the asymmetry of the shrug, but we must also look at the altitude. A high, tight shrug that reaches the ears is a signal of extreme neural stress and a lack of confidence. It is the body's attempt to protect the neck, the most vulnerable coordinate. The sovereign master maintains level shoulders. You do not allow your body to perform limbic shrinking, regardless of the pressure. By keeping your shoulders relaxed and wide, you broadcast a high-resolution signal of invincibility. You are the immovable object in the grid. The audiobook empire is built on this foundation of absolute physical stability. Stay on the frequency. The grid is yours to command. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. We must now perform a surgical audit of the law of interpersonal synchrony and the high-resolution dangers of neural over-mirroring. While we have established mirroring as a tool for building a biological bridge, the sovereign master recognizes that mirroring too perfectly or too quickly creates a frequency clash. This is known as the uncanny valley of body language. If you mirror a node's gestures with zero delay, their limbic system detects a predatory pattern. They feel audited, not understood. The 1% margin requires delayed synchrony. You wait for the target to shift their weight or adjust their posture, and only after a significant pause do you subtly align your frequency with theirs. This creates a subconscious sense of tribal alignment without triggering the target's sovereign shielding. Furthermore, you must learn to identify forced mirroring in others. When a node is trying too hard to please you or to deceive you, their mirroring will be clunky and out of sync with their verbal broadcast. You audit this as counterfeit resonance. They are trying to hack your system, but their software is low resolution. You stay still, you break the synchrony abruptly, and you watch as their internal state destabilizes. You are the lead node. You set the tempo. You do not simply follow the static of the grid. Let us now deconstruct the protocol of the seated leg lock. In a seated negotiation or audit, the way a node crosses their legs is a direct broadcast of their neural guardrails. If a node crosses their legs and points their knee toward you, they are building a physical barrier, a limbic wall between their vital organs and your broadcast. This is a signal of defensive posturing. However, if they cross their legs so that the knee points away from you, they have opened their ventral coordinate. They are signaling receptivity and trust. But there is a deeper layer, the ankle lock. When a node crosses their ankles and pulls them under their chair, they are withholding. This is the physical equivalent of biting one's tongue. They are literally locking their reactions to prevent a signal leak. You see this when a target is concealing a black swan or trying to remain calm under clinical pressure. The sovereign master identifies the ankle lock and knows that the truth is being suppressed. You do not ask for the truth. You apply tactical pressure to the topic until the ankles unlock. The moment the feet hit the floor, the limbic blockade has collapsed. You have reclaimed the coordinate. We must also audit the science of the nose touch during high-stakes broadcasts. The bungler believes any touch to the nose is a sign of a lie. The sovereign master knows it is a neural itch caused by the Pinocchio effect, a biological reality where the tissues in the nose become engorged with blood during moments of intense cognitive load or deception. This creates a subtle tingling sensation that the node must scratch. However, you must differentiate this from a cold weather rub or a habitual gesture. You look for the timing coordinate. If the hand moves to the nose the exact second you ask a hard target question, you have detected a limbic spike. The target's biology is reacting to the stress of the lie. Similarly, observe the mouth cover. When a node covers their mouth while speaking or even while listening to you, their subconscious is trying to stop the signal. They are either afraid of what they might say or they are repulsed by the frequency you are broadcasting. You recognize this self-censorship and you use it to map the target's internal morality grid. You know exactly where the no-go zones are located. Furthermore, let us analyze the protocol of the ear tug. When a node begins to tug at their earlobe or rub the back of the ear, they have heard something that they dislike or that makes them feel insecure. It is a limbic reset. They are literally trying to block the sound or soothe the anxiety caused by your broadcast. The sovereign master recognizes the ear tug as a sign that the target is self-soothing. You have reached a neural nerve. You maintain your late-night DJ voice and you continue to deliver your frequency with clinical absolute. You do not let the target reset their internal state. You keep the pressure high until the sovereign shielding is fully stripped away. This is how the 1% margin is maintained, through the relentless observation of these neural resets. The architecture of the handshake requires one final deeper audit, the sleeve pull. When a node pulls at their sleeves or adjusts their cuffs during a social introduction, they are performing high-status preening. They are signaling that they are a node of value who is concerned with their social mask. The sovereign master audits this as a sign of ego vulnerability. Someone who is overly focused on their preening is someone who can be manipulated through status and validation. You use strategic validation to feed their ego, making them feel like the lead node while you silently occupy their internal architecture. You use their need for status as a Trojan horse to enter their decision-making grid. By the time they realize you are in control, the audiobook empire has already occupied the territory. Finally, we audit the protocol of the jaw clench. The masseter muscle is one of the strongest in the human body and is the first to react to suppressed aggression. When a node is smiling but their jaw is clenched, the signal conflict is absolute. The smile is the social mask. The jaw is the limbic reality. They are broadcasting a hostile frequency while trying to project a green frequency. The sovereign master ignores the smile and calibrates to the jaw. You recognize that the target is a hidden aggressor. You do not engage in the conflict. You simply move to a defensive posture and wait for the target to exhaust their neural energy. You are the clinical auditor who sees the war beneath the peace. You stay focused, you stay still, and you stay sovereign. The grid is yours to command. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. We must now descend into the high-resolution audit of the ocular grid and the dominance of the eyebrows. In the global network of human interaction, the eyebrows act as emotional weather vanes, broadcasting the target's internal state before they even process the stimulus consciously. The bungler focuses on the mouth, but the sovereign master monitors the brow. When a node experiences a sudden neural spike of interest or recognition, the eyebrows perform a flash, a rapid upward movement that lasts for a fraction of a second. This is a high-resolution green light. It signals that the node is receptive and that the connection is open. However, when the eyebrows are pulled down and together, creating a neural furrow, the target is in a state of cognitive friction or aggressive audit. They are either struggling to understand your broadcast or they are actively resisting it. You recognize this red frequency and you do not push forward. You pause, you calibrate, and you wait for the brow to relax before delivering the core of your mission. This is the 1% margin of social timing. You are reading the weather of the target's mind through the movement of the brow. Furthermore, we must perform a clinical investigation into the anatomy of fear versus surprise. To the untrained eye, these two frequencies look identical. The sovereign master knows the biological difference is found in the duration and the limbic velocity. Surprise is a transient state. It is a system reset that lasts for a second at most. The eyebrows rise, the eyes widen, and the jaw drops. But the moment the brain categorizes the stimulus, the mask returns. If the expression lingers, it is counterfeit surprise, a social performance designed to deceive the grid. Fear, however, is a high-intensity frequency that involves the fear brow, where the eyebrows rise and pull together in a horizontal line. The eyes widen to increase the visual bandwidth, allowing the node to scan for exit routes. When you see the fear brow in a negotiation, you have occupied the target's internal architecture. You have triggered their survival software. You do not back down. You maintain your clinical stillness and watch as the target's sovereign shielding continues to disintegrate under the pressure of their own biology. Let us now deconstruct the gaze of the predator and the law of ocular dominance. In the science of human relationships, where you look is as important as what you see. The bungler uses a submissive gaze, frequently looking away or staring at the floor to signal that they are not a threat. They are yielding the coordinate. The sovereign master utilizes the power gaze. You focus your visual sensors on the third eye, the space between the target's eyebrows and just above the bridge of the nose. This creates a neural pressure that is felt by the target as an assertion of authority. It signals that you are auditing their very thoughts. However, you must calibrate this frequency. If you maintain the power gaze for too long, you trigger the target's aggression response. To build stealth rapport, you utilize the social gaze, focusing on the triangle between the eyes and the mouth. But when it is time to close the deal or demand the truth, you shift to the power gaze. You are the lead node, and you use your eyes to steer the interaction toward your desired outcome. We must also audit the protocol of blink rate synchronization. The blink rate is a direct indicator of neural processing load. When a node is under stress or performing a complex deception, their blink rate will often spike. They are struggling to maintain the mask. The sovereign master practices neural echoes. You subtly align your own blink rate with the target's to create a state of biological synchrony. This is a deep grid hack. When your biological rhythms match the target's, their limbic system begins to treat you as a trusted node. Once this bridge is built, you can then lead by slowing your own blink rate down. If the target's blink rate follows yours, you have achieved frequency capture. You have lowered their internal heart rate and adrenaline levels through the simple manipulation of your ocular sensors. You are controlling their internal state from the outside in. This is the ultimate 1% margin of nonverbal influence. Finally, we audit the science of the pupil of disgust. Beyond dilation and constriction, the sovereign master monitors the micro-aversion of the eyes. When a node encounters an idea or a person they find repulsed by, their eyes will perform a visual squint. It is as if they are trying to sharpen their focus while simultaneously protecting the ocular sensors from the toxic broadcast. You see this squint frequency and you know that you have reached a point of repulsion in the grid. You do not argue, you simply pivot. You change the frequency of the interaction until the squint relaxes and the pupils dilate. You are the neural navigator, weaving through the target's subconscious reactions to find the path of least resistance. The audiobook empire is built on this foundation of absolute ocular clarity. You see the truth because you know where to look. Stay on the frequency. The grid is yours. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. We must now pivot our clinical audit to the law of object displacement and the architecture of the desk. In the global network, the objects you place between yourself and another node are not neutral. They are neural barricades. The bungler uses their coffee cup, their smartphone, or their laptop as a shield, instinctively placing these items in their ventral space to protect their vital organs from the grid's pressure. This is a broadcast of biological vulnerability. The sovereign master, however, uses objects as territorial markers. You do not hide behind your tools, you use them to expand your sovereign shell. When you place your phone face down, away from your body and toward the center of the table, you are marking the coordinate. You are signaling that your attention is absolute and that you own the space between you and the target. Furthermore, observe when a target moves an object to block your broadcast. If you deliver a difficult truth and the target suddenly moves their glass of water between you, they have performed a visual and physical blockade. They are literally trying to delete the frequency of your words. You recognize this displacement and you move the object back, or you lean around it to maintain the direct neural link. You do not allow the target to build a wall in your presence. Let us now deconstruct the protocol of the torso and the ventral denial. The torso is the most honest part of the human broadcast system after the feet. While the face can perform a mask, the torso is slow and heavy. It follows the true intent of the limbic system. When a node is fully engaged and trusts your frequency, they will perform ventral fronting, turning their heart and stomach directly toward you. This is the green light of resonance. However, the moment the target feels a neural spike of disagreement or discomfort, they will perform ventral blunting. They will subtly turn their torso away, even if their head remains facing you. They are shielding their vital coordinates from your broadcast. The sovereign master audits this torso tilt with surgical focus. If you see the target's torso shift even a few degrees away, you have lost the 1% margin of trust. You do not continue the pitch. You stop and recalibrate. You use tactical empathy to bring their torso back into alignment before proceeding. You are the architect of the connection, and the torso is the foundation. We must also audit the gravity of deception and the limbic altitude. In the science of human relationships, truth is associated with upward momentum. When a node is excited, honest, and high status, their body defies gravity. Their eyebrows rise, their hands gesture upward, and they stand on their toes. This is the frequency of authenticity. Deception and defeat, however, are heavy. When a node is withholding a black swan or struggling with neural guilt, gravity takes over. Their shoulders slump, their hands hang heavy by their sides, and their head tilts downward. This is limbic heaviness. You audit these shifts in altitude during every interaction. If you notice a sudden altitude drop, where the target's energy and posture suddenly collapse after a specific question, you have identified a fracture. You have found the point where the lie has become too heavy for the target to carry. You do not let them recover. You stay on the coordinate until the mask is fully stripped away. You are the clinical auditor of human gravity. Furthermore, let us analyze the science of the shoulder shrug in the context of high-frequency commitment. We have established the asymmetry of the shrug, but we must also look at the clarity of the signal. A node who is truly committed to their broadcast will exhibit total symmetrical engagement. When they say, "I don't know," their entire body, shoulders, eyebrows, and palms will move in unison. This is neural coherence. The bungler, however, will often broadcast a muffled signal, a verbal no accompanied by a subtle head nod yes, or a verbal yes while their shoulders remain motionless. This is cognitive dissonance. Their brain is sending two conflicting frequencies. The sovereign master ignores the words and follows the limbic leak. If the body does not agree with the voice is a lie. You prioritize the biological data over the social script, ensuring that you are never be deceived by neural noise. The protocol of the neck touching requires one final deeper investigation into thermal regulation. When the brain experiences a neural surge of anxiety, the body's internal temperature rises. This is why a node will suddenly vent their clothing. Men will pull at their collar or rub the back of their neck to stimulate the vagus nerve and cool down. Women will frequently touch the suprasternal notch, the hollow of the throat, as a pacifying protocol. These are biological stress signals. They are the body's attempt to reset the frequency. The sovereign master observes this thermal reset and recognizes it as a sign of maximum vulnerability. The target is literally trying to breathe in a room where you have occupied all the space. You stay cool. You maintain your late-night DJ voice. You let the silence act as a catalyst, further destabilizing their frequency. You are in total control of the atmospheric pressure of the interaction. Finally, we audit the science of the hand-to-jaw evaluation. When a node is auditing your broadcast, their hand will often move to their jaw or chin. If they are stroking their chin, they are in a state of high-resolution evaluation. They are processing your data. However, if they rest their chin in their palm and their index finger points upward along the cheek, they are in a state of critical audit. They are looking for flaws in your frequency. If the thumb supports the chin while the other fingers cover the mouth, the target is suppressing a negative reaction. They are literally blocking their disagreement. The sovereign master recognizes these evaluation masks and adjusts the broadcast in real time. You do not wait for the no, you see the no being formed in the hand position long before it reaches the vocal cords. The Audiobook Empire is built on this absolute foresight. Stay on the frequency. The grid is yours. The signal is absolute. Continuing our clinical audit, we must now investigate the handshake protocol as the primary neural handshake of the grid. The bungler views the handshake as a social formality. The sovereign master views it as a diagnostic measurement of the target's neural hierarchy. When you engage a node, observe the palm orientation. A palm facing slightly upward is a submissive frequency, signaling a desire to please or a lack of internal authority. A palm facing downward is an aggressive overlay, an attempt to physically press down on your sovereign signal. The sovereign master maintains the vertical equalizer, a perfectly perpendicular grip that signals high-resolution peer status. If the target attempts the palm-down dominance, you recalibrate the geometry by stepping slightly into their left orbital space, forcing their hand into a vertical position. You have neutralized their aggression through the simple physics of the grid, without saying a word. Furthermore, be wary of the gloved handshake, where the target uses their second hand to cover yours. While the social mask portrays this as warmth, the biological reality is an attempt to box your signal and limit your movement. It is a broadcast of insincerity. You audit this as counterfeit intimacy, and you immediately reset your sovereign shielding. We must also deconstruct the architecture of seated power. In any meeting or negotiation, the coordinate you occupy at the table determines your status in the network. The bungler sits wherever there is an empty chair, often placing themselves in the flank position, the side of the table where they are easily ignored. The sovereign master identifies the head of the table as the control node. This position allows for a full bandwidth visual sweep of all other nodes. However, if the head is occupied, you seek the opposite coordinate to create a counter frequency. Observe the hooding gesture, where a node sits back and places their hands behind their head, elbows flared. This is a maximalist territorial broadcast. It signals absolute security and intellectual arrogance. It is a challenge to the grid. If a subordinate performs it, they are signaling defiance. If a superior performs it, they are broadcasting ownership. The sovereign master recognizes hooding as a high-intensity signal and responds with clinical stillness. You do not mirror the expansion. You maintain a compact, high-density posture that signals you are unimpressed by their theatrical display. Let us now audit the leg cleansing protocol in detail. This is one of the most reliable limbic leaks in a seated environment. When a node experiences a sudden neural spike of stress or is asked a question that threatens their internal alignment, their hands will move to their thighs. They will perform a downward stroking motion from the hips to the knees. This is leg cleansing. It is a biological attempt to soothe the nervous system and wipe away the friction of the interaction. You see this and you know that you have hit a neural nerve. The target is struggling to maintain their mask. The sovereign master does not provide relief. You maintain the line of questioning, watching the rhythm of the cleansing. The faster the stroke, the higher the internal pressure. You wait for the exact moment the hand stops and the fingers grip the knees. This is the launch position. The node is preparing to verbally defend themselves or end the interaction. You anticipate the shift and you control the transition. Furthermore, we must analyze the science of the partial barrier. In the global network, nodes often use objects to create neural buffers. Observe the glass holding protocol. A node who feels insecure will hold their glass with both hands, creating a ventral shield. They are literally placing a barrier between their heart and your broadcast. The sovereign master keeps their space clear. You hold your glass with one hand, or better yet, you leave it on the table to maintain an open architecture. This signals that you are biologically secure and do not require artificial protection. When you see a target hiding behind their coffee cup or their tablet, you recognize their vulnerability. You use strategic reassurance to lower their guard, and then you strike at the core of the negotiation when their ventral space is finally exposed. This is the 1% margin of tactical maneuvering. The protocol of the foot point in a seated circle is our next clinical target. Even when a node's torso and face are directed toward the lead node, their feet will often point toward the individual they find most interesting or threatening. This is the primal compass. If you are speaking and the target's feet are pointed at another node, you are not the primary frequency in their mind. You are background noise. The sovereign master audits its pedal orientation to identify hidden alliances and shadow influences in the room. You do not address the mask, you address the feet. By shifting your position to intersect the line of their foot point, you intercept the signal and force the target to recalibrate to your coordinate. You are the neural navigator, steering the hidden currents of the room toward your desired conclusion. Finally, we audit the science of the Lint-Egger. This is a form of passive aggression or dismissive displacement. When a node avoids eye contact by looking down and picking imaginary lint off their sleeve, they are signaling disinterest while attempting to lower your status. It is a low-resolution power play. The sovereign master does not compete for attention. You simply stop speaking. You allow the silence to hang in the air until the lint picker is forced to look up and re-engage. The moment they break their displacement gesture and make eye contact, you have reclaimed the lead node status. You do not acknowledge the interruption. You simply resume your broadcast as if the static never occurred. The audiobook empire is built on this absolute refusal to be sidelined. Stay on the frequency. The grid is yours. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. Let us now sharpen our clinical focus on the ocular signal grid and the high-frequency data broadcasted by the eyelids and pupils. In the science of human relationships, the eyes are not windows, they are high-bandwidth sensors that provide the most accurate telemetry of the target's limbic state. The bungler focuses on the color of the eyes or the intensity of the stare. The sovereign master audits the blink rate frequency. Under normal conditions, a human node blinks between 8 and 12 times per minute. However, when a node is subjected to neural stress or is attempting to maintain a complex deception script, the blink rate will spike dramatically. This is a sign of processor overload. The brain is struggling to reconcile the social mask with the biological truth. Conversely, a sudden drop in blink rate, a state of fixed stasis, indicates intense focus or predatory intent. You recognize these shifts in frequency as the most honest indicators of the target's internal clock. When you see the blink rate spike, you know the target is vulnerable. You do not offer relief. You maintain your sovereign stillness and watch as their internal architecture begins to fracture under the weight of their own static. Furthermore, we must deconstruct the protocol of the pupil. The pupil is a direct extension of the brain's autonomic nervous system, making it impossible to forge. When a node encounters a stimulus they find appealing, a lucrative proposal, a high-status individual, or a green-frequency idea, their pupils will dilate. This is neural expansion. It is an involuntary signal of interest and arousal. When they encounter a red frequency, disgust, fear, or a black swan they wish to avoid, their pupils will constrict into pinpoints. This is neural contraction. The sovereign master monitors these microscopic shifts with surgical precision. By observing the pupillary altitude, you gain access to the target's subconscious audit before they have even formulated a verbal response. If you deliver a term and the target's pupils constrict while they smile and say yes, you know the yes is a lie. You prioritize the biological data over the social performance, ensuring that you are always operating on the frequency of truth. Let us now audit the architecture of the eyelid and the visual blockade. When the brain encounters information that is repellent or threatening, it instinctively attempts to delete the visual input. This manifests as eyelid guarding, where the lids stay closed for a fraction of a second longer than a normal blink. It is the physical manifestation of "I don't like what I am seeing." In high-stakes social interactions, observe the target's lids when you introduce a new variable. If the lids linger closed, you have hit a neural nerve. They are trying to shut out your broadcast. A more intense version is the eye rub, where the target physically covers their eyes while speaking or listening. This is a broadcast of maximum cognitive friction. They are struggling to remain in the coordinate. The sovereign master recognizes the eye block as a diagnostic tool to map the target's internal no-go zones. You use this data to navigate the grid, bypassing the blockades or dismantling them with clinical efficiency. We must also analyze the protocol of the sideways glance and the ocular shield. When a node is skeptical or feels they are being audited too closely, they will often perform the side eye, a movement where the head is turned away, but the eyes remain focused on you. This is a defensive scan. It signals that the target is in a state of evaluation and does not yet trust your frequency. The sovereign master does not react with aggression. You utilize ventral openness and a deep frequency tonality to signal that you are not a threat to their sovereignty. You wait for the target to bring their head into alignment with their eyes, a state of total fronting. Only when the head and eyes are synchronized is the neural bridge fully established. This is the 1% margin of tactical patience. You do not close the deal on a sideways glance. You wait for the full bandwidth connection. The science of the micro-expression of disgust requires our attention. Disgust is a high-intensity signal of system rejection. It manifests as a brief wrinkling of the nose and a raising of the upper lip. The bungler often mistakes this for a momentary twitch. The sovereign master knows it is a limbic flare. If you see this expression when you mention a partner, a strategy, or a price, the target's internal OS has already rejected the proposal. The connection is toxic. You do not waste energy trying to convince a node that is broadcasting disgust. Instead, you perform a system reset. You change the topic, or you withdraw the proposal to clear the neural static. You protect your own frequency by refusing to engage with a coordinate that is fundamentally misaligned. This is the foundation of the Audiobook Empire's strategic hygiene. Finally, we audit the protocol of the eye roll. While often viewed as a sign of social disrespect, the sovereign master audits it as a dominance play. By looking up and away, the target is signaling that your broadcast is beneath their neural threshold. They are attempting to lower your status in the grid. You do not respond with ego. You respond with sovereign indifference. You continue your broadcast with absolute precision, ignoring their theatrical dismissal. When the target realizes their attempt to destabilize your frequency has failed, they are forced to recalibrate to your tempo. You maintain the lead node status by being the only node in the room who is not reacting to the social noise. Your stillness is your shield. Your observation is your weapon. The grid is yours to command. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. We must now audit the protocol of physical contact and the high-stakes frequency of haptics. In the global network, touch is the most primitive and powerful signal override available to a human node. The bungler uses touch indiscriminately, either invading the sovereign space of others or broadcasting a frequency of submission. The sovereign master recognizes that every touch is a neural transfer of status. Consider the hand on the shoulder. It is a broadcast of patronizing dominance. By placing your hand on top of another node's shoulder, you are physically and symbolically pressing down on their hierarchy. It signals that you are the senior node and they are under your protection or control. Conversely, the elbow touch, a brief light contact on the outer elbow during a request, is a high-resolution influence hack. The elbow is a neural dead zone that does not trigger the threat audit of the limbic system, yet the touch itself increases the probability of compliance by creating a momentary biological bond. You use this as a stealth catalyst to steer the grid toward your desired outcome. You do not touch for affection, you touch for frequency calibration. Furthermore, let us deconstruct the protocol of the self-hug. When a node feels exposed or threatened by a high-intensity broadcast, they will instinctively perform self-arm wrapping. This is a limbic shielding mechanism where the node crosses their arms and grips their own biceps. It is a biological attempt to provide internal stability in the face of grid turbulence. The sovereign master audits this as a sign of maximum insecurity. The target is literally trying to hold themselves together. A more subtle version is the hand-to-arm rub, a pacifying protocol used to lower the heart rate. You recognize these signals as thermal leaks. The target's sovereign shielding is overheating. You maintain your clinical stillness and you do not provide comfort. You allow the target's own biological reactions to act as a neural hammer, breaking down their resistance until the black swan they are hiding is finally revealed. You are the auditor who waits for the collapse. Let us now audit the science of manipulators and adapters. These are the repetitive, non-goal-oriented movements, fidgeting with a ring, adjusting a watch, or smoothing a tie, that the bungler dismisses as nervous habits. The sovereign master knows these are neural signal flares. Every manipulator is an attempt by the brain to discharge excess static caused by cognitive load or deception. If a node suddenly starts rotating their wedding ring the moment a specific liability is mentioned, you have identified a frequency fracture. The ring has become a neural grounding wire for their anxiety. Observe the watch adjust gesture. It is often a pre-departure cue or a status check. The target is signaling that their time is more valuable than yours, or they are seeking a neural reset. You do not allow the reset. You interrupt the manipulator by asking a direct, hard target question, forcing the node to re-engage with the primary frequency of the interaction. You are the one who controls the neural flow of the room. We must also analyze the architecture of clothing as a shield. In the Audiobook Empire, we recognize that the garments a node wears are part of their external OS. Observe the buttoning protocol. When a node buttons their jacket as they stand up or enter a room, they are armoring up. They are closing their ventral coordinate to prepare for an audit. Conversely, unbuttoning a jacket is a signal of ventral openness and sovereign confidence. It broadcasts that the node is not threatened by the environment. However, look for the collar pull or the scarf adjustment. These are venting gestures used when the limbic system experiences a thermal spike of fear or guilt. The target is literally trying to breathe. You see this respiratory static and you know that the mask of composure is a lie. You stay cool. You stay still. You occupy their visual field with an open, unyielding posture that signals your absolute dominance over the grid. The protocol of the hand in pocket requires a deeper investigation into hidden intent. When a node hides both hands in their pockets, they are performing a neural blackout. They are withdrawing from the network and concealing their biological broadcast. This is a sign of extreme social submission or active deception. The sovereign master always keeps their hands visible to maintain a high-resolution signal. However, the thumb-out pocket position is a dominance overlay. By exposing the thumbs while the fingers are hidden, the node signals that they are high status and untouchable. It is a sovereign display of relaxed power. You audit these pocket coordinates to determine the true neural baseline of every node in the room. You do not look at the suit, you look at the thumbs. The 1% margin is found in these microscopic details. Finally, we audit the science of the object barrier in digital and physical spaces. When a node places their laptop, their notebook, or even their hands in a teepee formation in front of them, they are building a neural wall. This barricade architecture is designed to create a sense of security. The sovereign master deconstructs these walls through physical incursion. You lean into their space, you move your own objects to intersect their neural grid, or you use tactical silence to force them to move their objects. By shifting the geometry of the table, you shift the geometry of the mind. You are the neural architect who reshapes the environment to suit your sovereign OS. The Audiobook Empire is built on this absolute refusal to accept any barrier. The grid is yours to command. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. We must now advance our clinical audit to the protocol of the oral grid and the high-resolution signals broadcasted by the lips and mouth. In the global network, the mouth is the primary tool for the social mask, but it is also a massive limbic leak for suppressed anxiety and cognitive load. The bungler focuses on the words being spoken. The sovereign master monitors the lip purse. When a node suddenly tightens their lips into a thin line, they are performing a neural seal. They are literally locking their thoughts to prevent a black swan from escaping. This is a high-intensity signal of disagreement or repressed anger. You recognize this seal, and you do not ask for a verbal confirmation. You already have the biological no. Furthermore, observe the lip lick. While often dismissed as a sign of dry lips, in a high-stakes audit, it is a thermal reset. The brain's stress response diverts blood flow away from the digestive tract, causing the mouth to go dry. The target is literally struggling to maintain their respiratory frequency. You see this, and you know the target is under limbic duress. You maintain your sovereign stillness and watch as the target's internal state continues to destabilize. You are the auditor who sees the thirst for truth behind the social performance. Let us now deconstruct the science of spatial anchoring and the geometry of standing power. When a node is standing in a room, their base of support is a direct indicator of their neural stability. The bungler stands with their feet close together, signaling a frequency of submission and a lack of physical authority. They are easily displaced. The sovereign master utilizes the wide base anchor. By standing with your feet slightly wider than your shoulders, you occupy a greater sovereign shell and signal that you are the immovable node of the network. Furthermore, observe the protocol of the leaning protocol. When a node leans against a wall or a piece of furniture, they are yielding their sovereignty to the environment. They're signaling that they require external support. The sovereign master remains freestanding. You do not lean, you do not hunch, and you do not seek support from the grid. You are the support. By maintaining a vertical, independent posture, you force all other nodes to calibrate to your stability. You are the lead node around which the rest of the room must orbit. We must also audit the protocol of the jaw clench in the context of suppressed aggression. The masseter muscles are the strongest in the human hardware and are the first to react to neural friction. When a node is smiling but their jaw is clenched, the signal conflict is absolute. The smile is the social mask, the jaw is the limbic reality. They are broadcasting a hostile frequency while trying to project a green frequency. The sovereign master ignores the smile and calibrates to the jaw. You recognize that the target is a hidden aggressor. You do not engage in the conflict. You simply move to a defensive posture and wait for the target to exhaust their neural energy. You are the clinical auditor who sees the war beneath the peace. You stay focused, you stay still, and you stay sovereign. You do not let the neural static of the target's aggression disturb your internal frequency. Let us now analyze the science of the micro-expression of fear. Fear is a high-intensity frequency that involves the fear brow and the mouth stretch. When a node feels a sudden neural spike of fear, the corners of the mouth pull back horizontally toward the ears. It is a primal preparation for the flight response. The bungler often mistakes this for a quick, nervous smile. The sovereign master knows it is a limbic flare. If you see this expression when you mention a specific liability or a black swan event, you have occupied the target's internal architecture. You have reached the core of their insecurity. You do not back down. You maintain your clinical pressure and watch as the target's sovereign shielding continues to disintegrate. You are the analyst who detects the fracture before the collapse. This is the 1% margin that ensures you are always in command of the grid. Furthermore, we must audit the protocol of the neck venting in the context of respiratory stress. When a node is under extreme neural pressure, their breathing becomes shallow and their internal temperature rises. This is why a node will suddenly vent their clothing. Men will pull at their collar or rub the back of their neck to stimulate the vagus nerve and cool down. Women will frequently touch the suprasternal notch, the hollow of the throat, as a pacifying protocol. These are biological stress signals. They are the body's attempt to reset the frequency. The sovereign master observes this thermal reset and recognizes it as a sign of maximum vulnerability. The target is literally trying to breathe in a room where you have occupied all the space. You stay cool. You maintain your late-night DJ voice. You let the silence act as a catalyst, further destabilizing their frequency. You are in total control of the atmospheric pressure of the interaction. Finally, we audit the science of the hand-to-chest protocol. When a node places their hand over their heart during a broadcast, the bungler believes they are being sincere. The sovereign master audits the timing coordinate. If the hand moves to the chest after the words are spoken, it is a counterfeit performance. It is a calculated attempt to manipulate the grid's perception of honesty. However, if the gesture is coherent, happening simultaneously with the words, it signals neural sincerity. You prioritize the neural coherence of the body over the social script. By observing these sync signals, you gain the ability to map the target's internal morality grid with surgical precision. You are no longer guessing, you are operating on raw biological data. The Audiobook Empire is built on this absolute foresight. Stay on the frequency. The grid is yours. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. We must now perform a high-resolution audit of the architecture of the shoulders and the shoulder shrug protocol. In the global network, the shoulders are the primary indicators of neural commitment. The bungler believes that a shrug is simply a sign of "I don't know," but the sovereign master recognizes the asymmetrical leak. When a node provides a verbal answer, but only one shoulder rises, the signal coherence is fractured. It is a muffled broadcast, indicating that the target is either lying, uncertain, or withholding a black swan. A true high-resolution shrug is symmetrical and involves the entire upper torso, signaling a genuine neural blank. Furthermore, observe the shoulder-to-ear rise. When a node is under intense clinical pressure, their shoulders will instinctively rise toward their ears. This is limbic shielding. They are attempting to protect the neck, the most vulnerable coordinate in the human hardware. You see this hunched frequency, and you know the target's sovereign shielding is failing. You do not provide comfort. You maintain your sovereign stillness and watch as the target's internal state continues to collapse. You are the architect who sees the fear behind the hunched frame. Let us now deconstruct the protocol of the hands in pockets with surgical precision. While we have audited the thumbs, we must now analyze the hidden palm. When a node hides their entire hand in a pocket, they are performing a neural withdrawal. They are signaling that they are no longer in the grid. This is a broadcast of extreme insecurity or active concealment. However, observe the hooking of the thumbs in the belt loops. This is a maximalist display of territorial dominance. By framing the genital region and exposing the thumbs, the node is broadcasting a high-status alpha signal. It is a challenge to the network. The sovereign master recognizes this primal overlay and does not react with ego. You maintain a neutral mask and focus on the target's ocular blink rate. If their eyes are blinking rapidly while their thumbs are hooked, the dominance display is a counterfeit. They are performing a script they cannot biologically support. You are the auditor who sees through the theatrical performance to the raw data underneath. We must also audit the science of the finger point and the dominance of the index. In the science of human relationships, the index finger is the neural spear. When a node points directly at you, they are invading your sovereign space and attempting to box your signal. It is a hostile frequency. The sovereign master never points. You utilize the open palm gesture, a broadcast of ventral openness and clinical authority. By keeping your palms visible and facing slightly upward or toward the target, you signal that you have nothing to hide and that you are the lead node of the interaction. If a target points at you, you do not point back. You utilize tactical stillness. You remain perfectly motionless and hold the power gaze until the target's hand drops. The node who breaks the gesture first is the node who yields the coordinate. You are the anchor point of the interaction, and your stability forces the target to de-escalate their neural aggression. Furthermore, let us analyze the protocol of the hand-to-face evaluation in the context of skeptical audit. When a node is processing your broadcast, their hand will often move to the face. Look for the index finger on the cheek with the thumb under the chin. This is the clinical evaluation position. The target is auditing your frequency for flaws. However, if the index finger moves to cover the mouth while the thumb supports the chin, the target is suppressing a negative signal. They are literally blocking their own disagreement. You recognize this neural dam, and you do not wait for them to speak. You address the hidden disagreement directly by saying, "It seems there is a point of friction here." This frequency capture surprises the target's limbic system, forcing them to reveal the black swan they were hiding. You are the one who steers the internal monologue of the target through the observation of their hand positions. The science of the leg cross in a standing environment also requires our attention. When two nodes are standing and talking, observe the balance coordinate. If a node crosses one leg over the other while standing, they are broadcasting extreme comfort and neural trust. They have voluntarily compromised their flight response because they do not perceive you as a threat. This is a high-resolution green light. However, if they suddenly uncross their legs and stand with their feet shoulder-width apart the moment a specific topic is introduced, they have moved into a ready state. Their limbic system has detected grid turbulence. They are preparing to defend their territory or exit the coordinate. The sovereign master recognizes this shift in altitude and knows that the neural bridge has been fractured. You must now work to recalibrate the frequency and rebuild the trust before the target performs a ventral denial. Finally, we audit the protocol of the objects on the table. In every negotiation, the grid's geometry is defined by the items placed between the nodes. Observe when a target moves their phone, their notebook, or their water glass closer to their body. This is territorial contraction. They are seeking internal security. Conversely, if they move their objects toward you, they are expanding their sovereign shell. They are attempting to occupy your coordinate. The sovereign master maintains a clean grid. You do not allow the target's objects to clutter your visual field. You use your own items as surgical markers, placing them with clinical precision to define the boundaries of the interaction. By controlling the physical geometry, you control the neural hierarchy. The audiobook empire is built on this absolute refusal to cede even a millimeter of territory. Stay on the frequency. The grid is yours. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. Moving from the static grid to the dynamic environment, we must now audit the science of the sovereign stride and the architecture of motion. In the global network, the way a node moves through space is a continuous broadcast of their internal calibration. The bungler walks with a fractured tempo. Their head is down, their shoulders are hunched, and their steps are uneven. This signals to the network that the node is neurally disorganized and lacks a clear mission. The sovereign master utilizes the purposeful cadence. You walk with a vertical spine, eyes fixed on the horizon, and a stride that is balanced and rhythmic. This is the frequency of command. By maintaining a consistent tempo, you signal that you are the lead node and that the environment must adjust to your speed. Furthermore, observe the arm swing protocol. A node who keeps their arms rigid by their sides while walking is broadcasting extreme suppression and internal tension. A node with a natural, expansive arm swing signals high-status security. They are not afraid to occupy space even while in motion. You audit these kinetic leaks to identify the most confident nodes in any open environment. You do not look for the loudest talker. You look for the node with the most stable stride. Let us now deconstruct the protocol of the doorway and the geometry of entry. In the science of human relationships, the moment you enter a new coordinate, the network performs a rapid audit of your frequency. The bungler enters a room and immediately stops, looking around for validation or direction. This threshold stasis signals submissiveness. The sovereign master performs a sovereign sweep. You enter the room without hesitation, pause slightly after crossing the threshold to establish your ventral presence, and then move toward the center of the grid with clinical intent. You do not seek permission to occupy the space, you assume ownership of it. Furthermore, observe the shoulder width entry. By maintaining a wide posture even as you pass through narrow spaces, you broadcast maximalist authority. You are the architect of your own arrival. By controlling the first 5 seconds of your physical presence in a room, you establish the neural hierarchy before a single word of the interaction has been exchanged. We must also audit the science of the standing pivot during social transitions. When a node is approached by another in a standing circle, their foot point reveals their true neural alignment. If a node turns only their head and shoulders to acknowledge you, but their feet remain pointed away, they are performing ventral denial. They are signaling that you are an interruption and not a primary frequency. You have not been granted sovereign access to their grid. However, if they pivot their entire body, feet, hips, and torso to face you, they have performed total calibration. This is a high-resolution green light. The sovereign master does not force an interaction where the feet are pointed away. You recognize the signal blockade, and you either shift the frequency to command their attention, or you move to a more receptive coordinate. You do not waste your neural energy on nodes that are broadcasting a frequency of rejection. You are the auditor of engagement, and you only invest in high-resolution connections. Furthermore, let us analyze the protocol of the hand-to-hip, or the Superman posture. This is a maximalist territorial broadcast. By placing the hands on the hips with the elbows flared outward, the node is physically expanding their sovereign shell. It is a display of alpha confidence and readiness for action. The bungler often uses this posture as an aggressive overlay to compensate for internal insecurity. The sovereign master utilizes this posture with clinical precision. You use it when you are marking a territory or when you are delivering a sovereign directive to the network. It signals that you are the lead node and that you have the resources to back up your broadcast. However, you must also look for the one-hand-on-hip variation. This is often a sign of impatience or critical evaluation. The target is signaling that their neural buffer is full and they are ready to terminate the interaction. You recognize this exit signal and you control the conclusion of the broadcast on your own terms. The science of the micro-expression of contempt during motion also requires our attention. Contempt is a high-frequency system rejection. It often manifests during a walk-and-talk interaction when one node feels they have established status dominance over the other. Look for the asymmetrical lift of the lip or the subtle head tilt back that signals they are looking down on your broadcast. The sovereign master detects this contempt leak and immediately recalibrates the interaction. You do not respond with anger, you respond with sovereign stillness. You stop moving, forcing the target to also stop and face you. This kinetic interruption breaks the target's dominance script and reestablishes you as the control node. By shifting the geometry of the motion, you shift the neural hierarchy of the conversation. You are the operator who controls the tempo of the grid. Finally, we audit the protocol of the hand-to-back in the context of forced guidance. In the Audiobook Empire, we recognize that placing a hand on another node's back to guide them through a doorway or into a room is an act of high-status dominance. It is a nonverbal signal of seniority. The node who is doing the guiding is the lead node. The node being guided is the subordinate node. The sovereign master never allows themselves to be guided in this manner unless it serves a stealth objective. If a node attempts to place a hand on your back, you subtly move out of their reach, or you perform a reciprocal touch on their elbow, neutralizing their dominance play through frequency alignment. You maintain your sovereign autonomy. The grid is a field of constant physical negotiation, and the 1% margin is found in the refusal to yield even the smallest coordinate. Stay on the frequency. The grid is yours. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. We must now elevate our clinical audit to the science of group limbic resonance and the architecture of collective synchrony. In the global network, when 3 or more nodes interact, a group frequency is established. The bungler enters a group and tries to compete with the static, becoming just another noise in the grid. The sovereign master, however, identifies the hub node, the individual who is currently controlling the group's attention and biological tempo. You do not interrupt the hub, you audit their synchrony. Observe the group's posture. If the majority of the nodes have mirrored the hub's posture, the neural link is strong. To disrupt this and establish your own sovereign command, you do not use words, you use postural dissonance. By adopting a posture that is radically different and more stable than the hub's, you create a neural spike in the room. The other nodes will instinctively feel the shift in the environment. Slowly, you transition into delayed mirroring of the hub, and once you have captured their frequency, you lead the group into a new posture. The node that the others mirror is the true leader of the grid. By controlling the group's physical alignment, you control their collective decision-making process. This is the 1% margin of group dominance. Let us now deconstruct the protocol of the power seat and the geometry of the rectangular table. In the science of human relationships, the environment is never neutral. It is an extension of the neural hierarchy. In a rectangular setting, the head of the table is the sovereign coordinate. It offers the widest visual bandwidth and signals seniority. However, the nodes seated to the immediate right and left of the head are the primal lieutenants. They are there to support the hub's broadcast. If you wish to challenge the lead node, you do not sit in the flank, you occupy the opposite head. This creates a direct frequency conflict that forces the room to choose between two poles of authority. If you seek stealth influence, you sit in the middle of the long side, where you can audit all nodes without being the center of aggressive scrutiny. You observe the ventral fronting of the participants. Even when nodes are looking at the speaker, their torsos and feet will often point toward the node they truly respect or fear. You follow these shadow signals to identify the real power node in the room, regardless of their official title. We must also audit the science of environmental shielding through personal items. In the Audiobook Empire, we recognize that objects are neural extensions of the self. Observe how a node places their briefcase, their folder, or their tablet. If they place a large folder vertically on the table, they are building a visual wall to protect their ventral space from your audit. It signals a state of extreme guarding. If they clutch their bag to their chest while sitting, they are in a limbic retreat. The sovereign master maintains a clean architecture. You place your items to the side, exposing your ventral coordinate to signal absolute sovereign security. By refusing to build a wall, you broadcast that you are the most stable and fearless node in the grid. Furthermore, observe when a target clears the space between you. If they move their coffee cup or notebook to the side to create an unobstructed line of sight, they are signaling total receptivity and neural alignment. They have lowered their shield. This is the exact second to deliver the core of your sovereign mission. Furthermore, let us analyze the protocol of the pre-broadcast audit. The most honest biological data is often broadcasted before the formal interaction begins. Observe the nodes in the waiting room or as they enter the coordinate. Look for self-soothing behaviors, adjusting jewelry, rubbing the back of the neck, or checking the phone for no reason. These are neural reset protocols used to manage pre-interaction anxiety. A node who is already pacifying before you even speak is a node whose sovereign shielding is already thin. You enter the room with massive stillness, contrasting their high-frequency fidgeting. By remaining calm while they are in a state of neural static, you establish the hierarchy of stability before the first word is spoken. You are the architect who builds the power dynamic in the silence. The science of the micro-expression of fear during group conflict also requires our attention. In a group setting, fear is often masked as professional concern. Look for the horizontal mouth stretch and the sucking in of the lips. When a node is challenged by a superior, they will often perform lip disappearance. Their mouth becomes a thin line as they literally swallow their words to protect their status. The sovereign master recognizes this as total submission. You do not continue to attack. You utilize clinical silence to let the weight of their own fear dismantle their position. By observing these limbic leaks in a public setting, you gain the ability to map the hidden alliances and neural weaknesses of the entire organization. You are the sovereign auditor who sees the fracture in the corporate mask. Finally, we audit the protocol of the hand-to-chin evaluation in collective decision-making. When a group is evaluating your proposal, watch for the cluster of evaluation. If the majority of the nodes have their hands on their chins, they are in a high-resolution audit. They are processing your frequency. However, if they begin to look at each other while performing ocular blocking or neck touching, the group frequency has turned negative. They are seeking social validation for their rejection. The sovereign master detects this shift instantly. You do not wait for the collective no. You interrupt the frequency by asking a pattern interrupt question that forces each node to return to their own individual audit. By breaking the group synchrony, you reclaim the lead node status and prevent a consensus of rejection. The grid is yours to command. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. We must now initiate a surgical audit of high-level deception and the asymmetry of the social mask. In the audiobook vault, we understand that truth is symmetrical, while deception is a fractured broadcast. When a node attempts to project a counterfeit frequency, their biological hardware often fails to synchronize. Observe the target's face for hemifacial asymmetry. When an emotion is forced, be it a smile of agreement or a look of concern, it often appears more intense on one side of the face than the other. This is because the social mask is driven by the motor cortex, which lacks the neural depth of the limbic system. You recognize this as a fractured signal, as a definitive marker of insincerity. The 1% margin is found in the ability to detect these microscopic signal clashes. You do not react to the words, you audit the asymmetry. If the mouth says, "I agree," but the left side of the face remains rigid, you are dealing with a shadow agreement. You have identified a black swan in the interaction. You stay still, you maintain the sovereign gaze, and you allow the silence to expand until the target's internal friction forces them to reveal the truth. Furthermore, let us deconstruct the protocol of the ocular blockade in high-stakes interrogation. When a node is confronted with a truth they cannot bypass, they will perform visual guarding. This goes beyond a simple blink. It is a prolonged closure of the eyes, often accompanied by a hand moving to rub the lids. The brain is literally attempting to delete the frame of the interaction. It is a biological system reset. The sovereign master recognizes this as a sign of maximum cognitive load. The target has run out of neural bandwidth to maintain the lie. You do not interrupt the reset. You wait for the eyes to reopen, and the moment they do, you deliver the most critical sovereign directive of the session. You catch them in the neural gap between the blockade and the reestablishment of the mask. This is how you navigate the grid with surgical timing, exploiting the biological limitations of the human node to achieve absolute dominance. We must also audit the science of the micro-shrug during verbal affirmations. When a node says yes but performs a subtle, one-sided shoulder shrug, their limbic system is broadcasting a neural no. This signal muffle is one of the most reliable indicators of lack of commitment. They are physically shrinking away from their own words. The bungler accepts the verbal yes and moves forward, only to be blindsided later by a grid failure. The sovereign master audits the shoulders as the source of truth. If the neural coherence is missing, the deal is not closed. You stop the broadcast and address the limbic leak directly. By demanding total physical alignment, you ensure that every alliance in your network is built on a high-resolution foundation. You are the clinical auditor who refuses to build on a fractured grid. Furthermore, let us analyze the protocol of the ventral shield in a standing environment. When a node feels audited or threatened, they will often shift their body so that an arm or an object, like a smartphone or a folder, is positioned directly over their suprasternal notch or their solar plexus. This is ventral guarding. They are protecting their most vulnerable biological coordinates. The sovereign master recognizes this shielding protocol as a broadcast of internal defeat. The target has already surrendered the sovereign space. You do not move to lower their shield through force. Instead, you utilize tactical empathy. You lower your own vocal frequency and open your ventral coordinate, signaling that you are the lead node and the environment is safe for their submission. Once the shield drops, you have total access to their neural architecture. You are the master of the biological bridge, knowing exactly when to apply pressure and when to provide a neural path for compliance. The science of the pupil of deception also requires a final, deep investigation. While we have discussed dilation, we must now monitor the pupillary bounce. When a node is calculating a lie, the pupils will often perform a rapid constrict-dilate cycle as the brain switches between the internal calculation and the external performance. This is the neural pulse of the liar. You observe this flicker and you know the target is processing static. They are not in a state of neural flow. The sovereign master remains biologically quiet, minimizing their own signals to better detect the pupillary fluctuations of the target. You are the neural interceptor who catches the deception before it is even translated into words. This is the 1% margin that makes you untouchable in the grid. Finally, we audit the protocol of the hand-to-neck pacifier in response to hard target questions. When you deliver a sovereign audit and the target's hand moves to cover their throat or rub the back of their neck, they are broadcasting a high-intensity fear frequency. The neck is the neural gateway, and the body's instinct is to protect it when the survival OS is triggered. You see this pacifying flare, and you know you have hit the nerve center of the interaction. You do not let up. You maintain your clinical stillness and your sovereign gaze. You allow the target's own biological reactions to act as a neural hammer, breaking through the final layers of their social mask. The audiobook vault is built on this relentless pursuit of raw data. You are the observer who sees the truth because you have the courage to audit the biology. The grid is yours. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. We must now advance our clinical audit to the science of limbic attraction and the architecture of biological resonance. In the global network, attraction is not a social choice, it is a neural alignment. The bungler believes in the law of attraction as a mystical force, but the sovereign master recognizes it as the law of biology. When two modes are in a state of high-resolution interest, their bodies perform automatic synchrony. Observe the mirroring of the pupil. When a target is attracted to your broadcast or presence, their pupils will dilate involuntarily to capture more of your signal. This is a green frequency that cannot be forged. Furthermore, look for the ventral openness in a social grid. A node that is interested in your coordinate will turn their heart, stomach, and toes toward you, even if they are speaking to another node. They are signaling priority. The Sovereign Master audits these resonance markers to identify the most receptive nodes in the room. You do not waste your neural energy on closed systems. You occupy the nodes that are already broadcasting a frequency of receptivity. Let us now deconstruct the protocol of the preening reflex. In the science of human relationships, when a node enters the orbital shell of someone they find high status or attractive, they perform involuntary grooming. This manifests as smoothing the hair, adjusting a tie, or touching the neck. It is a biological reset designed to present the best possible social mask to the lead node. The Sovereign Master observes this preening flare and recognizes it as a sign of ego submission. The target is seeking your validation. You do not provide it immediately. You maintain your clinical stillness and your sovereign gaze, allowing the target's internal pressure to mount. By delaying your signal approval, you increase your value in the grid. You are the anchor node, and everyone else is calibrating their performance to your silence. This is the 1% margin of social dominance. We must also audit the science of the foot point in attraction. We have established that the feet are the most honest nodes, and in the context of attraction, they are the primal compass. If a group of nodes is standing in a circle and the target's feet are pointed directly at you while their torso is facing another speaker, their limbic intent is focused on your coordinate. They are signal leaking their true interest. The Sovereign Master recognizes this hidden alignment and utilizes it to steer the interaction. You do not need to be the loudest broadcaster in the room. You only need to be the node that the feet are pointed toward. By controlling the pedal geometry, you control the underlying currents of the interaction. You are the navigator who sees the destination before the journey has even begun. Furthermore, let us analyze the protocol of the barrier object in social settings. When a node feels neural friction or insecurity in the presence of a high-status individual, they will often use their smartphone, their drink, or their purse as a limbic shield. They place these items between their ventral coordinate and your broadcast. This is a defensive blockade. The Sovereign Master recognizes this shield as a sign that the target's sovereign shielding is under stress. To bypass it, you do not use aggression. You utilize tactical stillness. You remain ventrally open, broadcasting a frequency of clinical security that forces the target's limbic system to realize that the shield is unnecessary. Once they move the object, signaling total receptivity, you have successfully occupied their neural space. You have moved from a threat frequency to a trusted node. The science of the micro-expression of interest also requires our attention. Look for the head tilt and the exposed neck. When a node is engaged and trusts your frequency, they will tilt their head, exposing the carotid artery. This is one of the most ancient sovereign signals of peace and vulnerability. It is a high-resolution green light. The Sovereign Master recognizes this exposure as an invitation for neural connection. You respond with a subtle mirror of the tilt, building a biological bridge that allows for the transfer of high-bandwidth data. You are no longer just speaking, you are synchronizing with the target's biological hardware. This is how the Audiobook Vault builds its influence, not through noise, but through the surgical alignment of frequencies. Finally, we audit the protocol of the touch and withdrawal. In the grid of attraction and influence, physical contact is a neural spike. A brief, accidental-seeming touch on the arm or shoulder during a high-resolution moment creates a surge of oxytocin and dopamine in the target's brain. However, the Sovereign Master knows the power is in the withdrawal. By being the first to break the contact, you signal high-status independence. You are the node that cannot be easily possessed. This frequency scarcity makes your presence more valuable. You are the sovereign architect of the interaction, manipulating the target's brain chemistry through the simple physics of proximity and touch. Stay on the frequency. The grid is yours. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. We must now master the final protocol, the sovereignty of the closing. In the global network, the closing of a deal, a negotiation, or a relationship is where the highest frequency of neural friction occurs. The bungler feels the pressure of the finish line and begins to broadcast static. They talk too much, they fidget with their hands, and they perform pacifying gestures like neck rubbing or collar venting. They are desperate to escape the tension. The sovereign master, however, utilizes clinical stillness. When the final terms are delivered, you do not seek validation. You deliver the frequency, and then you deactivate the broadcast. You remain perfectly motionless, maintaining the sovereign gaze without blinking. This creates a neural vacuum in the grid. The human brain is biologically programmed to fill silence, and by refusing to do so, you force the target to negotiate against themselves. They will offer concessions, reveal black swans, and yield coordinates just to lower the atmospheric pressure you have created. You are the architect of the silence, and the silence is your most lethal weapon. Furthermore, let us deconstruct the science of the post-agreement audit. The interaction does not end when the yes is spoken. Observe the target the moment they believe the broadcast is over. This is when the limbic guard drops. Look for the exhalation of relief, a long, deep breath that signals they have been suppressing neural stress. If the target immediately performs ventral shielding or turns their feet toward the exit after the agreement, the neural link was forced, not forged. They are experiencing buyer's remorse at a biological level. The sovereign master audits this post-grid leak to determine the stability of the alliance. If you detect high-frequency regret, you do not leave the coordinate. You re-engage the protocol of resonance to stabilize their frequency before exiting. You ensure the architecture of the deal is biologically sound before you move to the next node. We must also audit the protocol of the physical departure. The way you exit a coordinate is the final signature of your frequency. The bungler leaves hurriedly, signaling that they are relieved the audit is over. This lowers their status in the aftermath. The sovereign master performs a sovereign exit. You gather your items with clinical deliberation, maintain a vertical spine, and deliver a final power handshake that is perfectly calibrated. You do not look back. By exiting with massive stillness, you leave behind a neural footprint of absolute authority. The nodes remaining in the room will continue to calibrate to your frequency long after you have left the grid. You have not just occupied the space, you have colonized the atmosphere. This is how the audiobook vault maintains its dominance, through the lasting impact of the sovereign signal. Finally, we audit the science of the micro-expression of regret. Look for the lip compression and the downward oculus shift in the seconds following a commitment. This is the limbic flash of a node that feels they have yielded too much. You recognize this signal flare and you use it to your advantage. You do not offer to change the terms. You offer strategic validation. You feed their ego to mask their biological loss. By making the target feel like the lead node in their own narrative, you secure their compliance while maintaining total control of the source code of the deal. You are the neural engineer who builds the bridge and the gate. The grid is yours to command. The signal is absolute. The sovereign is in control. As we finalize this clinical audit of the human broadcast system, you must accept your new status as a sovereign architect of the grid. You are no longer a passive node receiving static. You are the lead signal that dictates the tempo and reality of every interaction. The journey through the audiobook vault has stripped away the low-resolution illusions of the social mask. leaving you with the raw biological source code of the human animal. You have mastered the architecture of stillness, the geometry of space, and the linguistics of limbic honesty. From this coordinate forward, every room you enter is a laboratory under your command. The signals are yours to intercept, the frequencies are yours to manipulate, and the dominance is yours to sustain. You stand in the 1% margin looking down at a world blinded by words. Stay calibrated, stay silent, stay sovereign. The mission is complete, but the occupation has only just begun. The Audiobook Vault remains your command center for total psychological and biological superiority. The signal is now absolute. The sovereign is in control.